No, I think that society has gotten away from that, you know? I think sometimes a lot of women, and no disrespect to his situation, but I think a lot of women sometimes say I need to take care of myself.
Welcome to the Bass Reeves Gun Club podcast, where we discuss all things firearm and shooting sports. I'm your host, Antonio Hicks, and I'm excited to bring you the latest news, tips, tricks, and historic discussions about guns in the minority community. We are a pro-Second Amendment community of responsibly armed citizens, and we take pride in learning and sharing our knowledge within the community. So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in.
Welcome to the Bass Reeves podcast. I am your host, Antonio Hicks. Joining me on this panel discussion about women bear a gun is Sean Purdy and John Cox. This is a continued conversation from the discussion we had in the previous episode with man bearer guns, having the men join us on the panel today to talk about their viewpoint on it and where they stand with it. So in the first part of the discussion, referring to the latest trending debate, would you prefer to be in the woods alone with a woman, a gun, or with a bear?
Well, if I'm just camping and I'm familiar with the area and I'm camping, I think I'd rather be with a woman. If I'm camping and I'm not sure about the area, then I'd like to be with my firearm. I want to make sure I can come back home.
Yeah, same here. If I'm not familiar with my environment, I'd rather have a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, my stance on it was that I'd rather be with the firearm and or the bear, because I have this thing now because I just don't trust humans, and I don't. So to me, it don't matter if it's a man or a bear. I just don't trust humans because humans are unpredictable. So you don't know what the situation gonna be like, whether if it's a state of hunger or it's a survival thing or whatnot, or if you get to a place where it's cold and you have another pair of clothing that they could potentially use. I'd rather be with either the bear or the firearm, because my attitude with the bear is, at least I know if I get hungry, I can go potentially kill the bear. Of course, it takes some effort, but I can potentially kill the bear.
Right.
If I get too hungry, I can also follow the bear to his food source and figure out where it's eating at, and I can get from there too. Or if I get too cold, I can potentially take the bear out and get some clothing from the bear. But yeah, I can't do human beings at all.
Yeah, wow. When I was younger, I got some certifications from the New Jersey School of Conservation on advanced camping. And so one sometimes is better than two, right? And since we radiate at 98.6 degrees, when it gets cold, we can warm each other, in terms of the woman. And we can divide up tasks, so if it's in terms of building shelters, lean-tos, and things like that, that's fine. Like I said, if that's, if I'm going in a known area, my family and I, we like to camp. Not necessarily tent camping, but we like to cabin camp. But we still use some of those same skills, of foresting and stuff like that. But if I don't know the area and if I'm on some survival thing, then yeah, give me a gun and a nice survival knife, and I take my chances.
I mean, it kind of coincides with the next question. Like, given your response to the first question, like, how does your perception change if you're allowed to have your firearm with you in either of those scenarios?
Oh, definitely. I'd have lady and my favorite pistol.
Yeah.
And my pistol's named Josephine. So yeah, Miss Baker. Right.
In my case, my wife is a member of the Bass Reeves Gun Club, so she's a better shot than I am. So it'd be good to have her as well.
And see, that makes a difference.
She's very proficient in both rifle and pistol. So
yeah, see, mine is not. Mine's scared of weapons. And I try to get her to shoot and everything. Yeah, she's scared of weapons.
Well,
so
she's the one that got me started, so.
Oh, shucks, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
My wife can shoot. Her weapon is designed for her, so it has a laser that's pressure triggered on the guard. So she points and shoots, but she's not one that would like to shoot. She just understands that it may be necessary, so she keeps one, But,
yeah, mine is, because she has this thing where her ears are like sensitive to loud noises. She's sensitive to like fireworks and things, so she don't want to come in there with a weapon. So I guess my safeguard for what we use around the house, outside of the scenario, I have a firearm with no, it's not what I'm thinking of. It doesn't lock up anything. So it's right there by the nightstand, so if she needs to, she can just pick it up, point and shoot.
Right. That's basically scenario for my wife. It's interesting that you said that about the hearing. My wife has that kind of same thing too. Loud noise bother her, yeah.
So in a potentially risky situation, such as let's say you out at night, what would you feel better protected with? Your lady by your side, or who is unarmed, or be by yourself with your own firearm?
Oh, me and the firearm, for sure. Yeah, late at night, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, what about you?
Well, see, mine's going to be armed, so.
So both of y'all straps up.
Matter of fact, when we go out, it's like, who's going to carry? Because it depends on what she's wearing or what well, of course, I can hide under my coat or jacket or anything like that. And if she's got on a nice dress, kind of hard to do or put in a purse. So it's always kind of, who's going to, paper, rock, scissors, who's bringing theirs or who's going to keep, what we're going to keep in the car. So I'm kind of fortunate in that situation that both of us are members and both of us, carry and both of us are active shooter. Her being more than me, but kind of equal in that regard.
Yeah, I'm one of those where I'd rather have the firearm because y'all are men. You understand that if it's another body there, now you got to watch out for that body while also watching out for the situation. So at least if I know if it's just me, myself, and I know what to do and how to get away from the situation without having to worry about the other individual, either her or my children.
Yeah, so we have a Men's Day Out program at Bass Reeves, and we kind of run those kind of scenarios when we're out with our family and so forth and so on, and how to position your family when you have to take care of the threat yourself, know. And so in my home, my wife and my son, I would be point. My son would be secondary. My wife would be third. But if I was out and about with my wife, she would know to get behind me, I'm going to square up, and I'll take whatever's coming their way. But she also would know how to move in order to stay behind me and not get outside of my field so that, she's covered. I'm her cover. Or I'm her concealment, put it that way, because, of course, I'm not going to be effective cover. But, she understands to stay behind me and let me do my thing, Also not to be distracted, but to let me do my thing. And she will trust that I can get that shot. She's seen me get my shots in. She know I'm not going to miss. Yeah, so just give me a chance. I'm not going to run from it. I'll put in the best situation, and then I'm going to go handle what needs to be handled, for sure. Yeah.
Now, when y'all out and about, this is outside of the regular questions, but do you typically have your wife in front of you, or would you rather have her behind you?
Oh, so we shoot one hand in those situations. So we use our supporter hand to keep her behind us. You understand? Even the child, right? To keep them behind us, to let them know, hold his hand, stay right there. And then we train with our dominant hand to shoot single-handed and to be able to take those shots. So we run those scenarios, always keeping us square and then behind us. Now, some of us travel with bulletproof vests and things like that. So we train in those scenarios too. Especially if we know we're going someplace hot, we'll keep bulletproof vests in the car. And some of us also have the single shot that fits in the backpack that you can put out so that they can use it to cover themselves as we get in the way. But yes, we stay on the X, facing the threat and keep them behind us. Yes, but that usual hand is holding them behind us so that they don't get paranoid or get scared or frightened and move.
What about you?
Well, I guess in my situation, natural instinct would be to, like John said, stand in front, use my dominant hand. But knowing that my spouse is also an active shooter, it's almost like, she's got my six, so she's got the back. But if we are with the kids, then the kids are in the middle, so we're kind of running front and back. So I guess for us, it's really more of a team effort, just knowing what we're both going to do, who's going to take point, and who's going to.
Yeah, that's a great scenario. My wife, not so much. If she's shooting, it's because she's cornered. She's got to.
Right.
My son would be a little bit more aggressive, but when we go out to dinner, That's when I go out to the dinner, I carry in a bag, right? So it's a bag carry. Trigger's covered. Make sure everybody understands that. If you carry in a bag, you must have the trigger covered. So you're either using a holster or you're using a trigger cover. But when I carry in a bag. So if I'm going to dinner, that way if I'm seated, usually my son sits on the same side as I do, and he has access to the bag too. We both face the door. My wife faces us. And so if something happens, we know, either one of us can pull it. If he catches it before I do, he's not going to miss either.
See that we have a push-pull about who faces the door. It's like whoever gets to sit down first has it with us. And me, especially with my limited background in martial arts, I do get nervous with my back toward the door. Mm-hmm. But she does too. And so it's like, and so a lot of times she'll kind of defer to me. She's like, all right, I'll let you sit here because I know you won't be able to pay attention without with your back to the door. So we do have that push-pull kind of thing when we're out at dinner.
Yeah, my training had me putting, like my walk, we are walking the neighborhood, I generally have her in the front. Because she asked this scenario one, she said, where would you prefer me to stand? And I was like, well, like how I was trained was like have you in front of me, because that way I can see the individual and what the move they're getting ready to make, if they're going to do anything towards her. And I have better control over the situation to where if I see them getting ready to make a move, I can push her over to the side and step up. Whereas if she's behind me and the person walks past me, they have a stronger chance or opportunity to grab her and pull her away. And now I'm in a more defensive situation as opposed to an offensive situation.
Well, it's interesting because in the tradition of Black Arms, my dad, my grandfather, World War II, just growing up that way, what would happen is men would generally be on the outside, right?
Yeah.
Walk side by side, but men would generally be on the outside to guard against anything from the curbside, or cars pulling up, or anything like that. So we'd be in between that. And then, she's would be, on my inside, on pistol side, and that's where I would be able to turn the square again and then have her behind me.
Yeah.
She knows to stay behind me, get in the small of my back and let me do my thing. But I would be afraid in my.
Yeah, mine is, so I'm similar as you. Like growing up in the South, that was just a Southern thing. Like you walk to the outside of your wife, no matter where you at.
Yeah, I would be afraid to have her in the front because I can't control the situation with her in front of me. I'd have to pull her to get it behind me so that I'd have a clear line of sight. One of the things we teach, of course, in Bass Reef is, know your sights and know your target and what's behind it, right? Mm-hmm. So she would be in my line of sight. If she was behind me, anywhere I turn, she knows she can stay behind me and clear out of my line of sight. So she's not, in front of me is a problem, I think, for me. Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable.
All right. Now, in all of society, do you think that society puts too much faith in men to protect everybody else?
No, I think that society has gotten away from that, Mm-hmm. I think sometimes a lot of women, and no disrespect to his situation, but I think a lot of women sometimes say, I need to take care of myself. And I think that's fine. You should have those skills to be able to take care of yourself, to defend if I'm not around and so forth. You should carry the level of self-defense that you'd be comfortable with, because there's always repercussions to any action that you take. Mm-hmm. For my wife, she would probably have a very hard time if she ever had to put somebody down, right? That would be difficult for her. That's just not who she is. Right. So even with the pistol, I have to say, well, babe, at least carry some mace, or whatever. Her thing is, no, you just come get me, right? Mm-hmm. I guess you do that, right? So I understand it, that some women feel like that, I'd rather rely on me than anybody else. But I think men, especially in this particular time and age, men need to be more of the protectors of the community, because what's coming down the pike now, women are great with the protesting and the organizing and so forth and so on. But just like back then, in the Jim Crow era, men need to be out there like the Deacons of Defense and, making sure that the women can do that work and are protected when they do that work, So I think the balance would be nice to have his situation at home. Oh, yeah, he has a perfect situation. Right. The balance would be nice that way. But men definitely need to be strong out in the community, and people need to know that if you come into this particular community of men, there's going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah. and women should feel comfortable that way. We're supposed to create those safe spaces for our family and things like that. We're supposed to nest amongst ourselves or as brethren, right, as individuals, right? We're supposed to be protectors of the community. So that's a job for us, and we shouldn't give that up, you know. And even if you're not a father or whatever, you're still a brethren in the community, right? So that means that, you know, that neighbor down the block that don't have a man in the house, she should know that they could run to you, right?
Yeah.
That should be something that should be possible, right?
It's funny you bring it up because my neighbor across the street from me is two women. Mm-hmm. It's a mother and her daughter, but her daughter's like in her late 20s or early 30s, and then they have the mother has her parents living there, so it's older people.
Right.
So I will always come home, because I work from home, so their trash can be down the street or whatever, or I would see something out on the curb, and I would always pull it up to the side of the house or make sure everything was good around the house. And I guess they had cameras outside, and they started seeing it. So she came over one day and brought me a bottle of wine, and she was like, "We appreciate you because we ain't never seen nobody do that before, and we noticed that you actually bring the trash can and everything else in, and you always watching out for us." But I'm like, that's how I grew up, to be a protector of those that are around me, especially this lady. There's no other man around the house.
Yeah, same way. When I grew up, it was my block, right? Mm-hmm. So what goes on my block, I'm pretty much responsible for. It's not gonna go down like that on my block.
Right.
Not where I live. That can't happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so my friends on their block, it was the same way. And if something was going on in the neighborhood, there was a loud call, and if you heard it, we all, as members of our blocks, got together and squashed whatever it was. We lived in the suburbs of Newark, right? So sometimes you had some things come into the neighborhood where they were just harvesting because they were gonna rob the little rich kids or rob the differently economically situated other kids, right? That had things that they thought that they could take, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you had to protect the borders, right? So you grew up as a group of kids who understood that if the call was made, we all gonna go and do what we have to do in order to protect the neighborhood, right? And that's how it was back then. It wasn't a gang. We were just crewed up to protect ourselves. And also we played block sports together. So we had a block football team or an area football team that played the other side of town and stuff like that. And so, you know, those types of things. And that stuff needs to come back.
It does, yeah.
The community needs to be community, right?
Right.
Especially in situations, like I said, what's coming up now, you know? Right.
Now, I'll say that your question was, do we put too much emphasis on men as protectors? Mm-hmm. I would say that we've let part of the society down. And I think that's why, as John stated, a lot of women have said, you know, I'm just going to have to do things on my own. You know, that's one of the things that I've been taught as I've gotten older and become more mature, is that we are the protector of this world. I mean, of our children, of our spouses, of other people's kids. You know, I was joking with my wife the other day. You know, we were talking about a friend of mine. You know, that I said if I ever saw somebody, you know, mess with his kids, it's like they gonna have to deal with me,
right,
before they deal with him. And I know he would do the same for me. And so I think a lot more of that is needed. And I think that the people that we're around should know that not necessarily an expectation, but should expect that from us. Mm-hmm. You know, that like, hey, I can go to Sean or John, you know, if I need help or protection of some sort. Just know that you're not alone out there. Like, you don't have to rely, you know, because you can't. I've always been taught as well that, you know, and John said it earlier, you know, if you're in the woods by yourself, two is better than one. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can do a little bit by yourself, but you can get a lot more done with the help of another person or the help of a community, you know, a family. We just shouldn't be trying to do things on our own so much and be so isolated so that we don't know each other or feel comfortable around each other.
Right.
And I think, you know, according to, you know, with the opening question regarding, you know, men, bear, or you know, what women feel comfortable with is, you know, when they say they're more comfortable with the bears because, you know, man has let them down. Mm-hmm. Bear ain't done nothing to him. You know, bear might see him and just walk off. May not have food. May not, you know, they may not have anything that the woman wants to just walk off. But man's going to do something totally different. You know, whether it's, I don't want to say it, but, you know, physical, mental, you know, sexual, just whatever the case may be, we've let society down in areas.
I think it's boiled down to trust, right?
Right.
I think it really is a trust issue. And I think the lack of trust in black men, I'm just going to speak for black men because that's just what I know. But I think the lack of trust comes from not seeing them being well prepared, right? So, it's hard to have faith in someone, you considered a boy, right? I think everybody will get that.
Oh yeah, we understand that.
But so it's hard to have trust in that, especially when you see his major concern is flossing, not the traditional things that make a person feel safe. Consistency, good credit, good choices on a regular basis. Can he take care of himself? Does he take care of himself?
Where do you think the breakdowns come from?
I think it comes from men not being men, right? From men not being men and men not being men to their sons, right? Like I said, for me, I put a lot into my son. So I want to make sure he chooses a worthy mate because, that is a lot of work, right? He's intelligent, well respected, and he's never had a discipline issue, but he's very capable. So whenever he's like when he was in sports, he was captain of defense on the football team. He was middle linebacker, lacrosse defensive captain as well. So he's not afraid to bang. Very polite. You wouldn't know that he can shoot, rifle, pistol, bow and arrow. You wouldn't know that he had a good martial arts background and is solid on takedown. You wouldn't know any of those things from him, right? But if you do get to know him, you'll have confidence in him and you'll trust him, and that's what you need to have to lead. So they need to see in you the things that makes them feel safe and know that you can handle that, and then they'll give it to you. If they're not letting you lead, in most cases, it's because they don't trust you, right? And you haven't earned that trust. That's a hard situation to be in if you're, a male or alpha male, when they don't trust you. But then you have to ask yourself, why is that? What are you not doing? What's not consistent about what you do?
Right.
I also believe that, when it comes to men and women, that, if she's better at something, of course, she should. She should do that. So where my wife is better at things, of course, please lead, right? Take that off my plate, right? I could have some things off my plate. But then where I'm strong, and I'm strong in the areas that she doesn't want to be strong. So that helps as well, and she's seen enough to know that, okay, he's got that, and I don't have to worry. So I think that's what it is. We need to make sure we train our young men to have all those areas of concern, to be experts in those areas, to understand that that's really what makes relationships work. It's not about purple jeans or some other fashion thing or having muscles for muscle's sake, or that doesn't, that might get the women who feel like I got everything else, so that's all I need from you, right? And you can be one of those, and like I said, we have a name for that. But if you really want to be a man, and if you really want to have some effective community, I would say, then you need to have all the other things that make people feel safe. And you usually see that from people who are just automatically put in leadership positions. They don't ask for it, but people gravitate to them, and that's because people feel safe, right, around them and feel like they'll make good decisions on behalf of the group. You want to be that guy, right? You don't necessarily want to be the flashy guy, but I think we need to do more of that, and women will be fine with giving us the role that we desire, and it'll make sense and it'll work. Some of the things that we used to do out of the past that we've let go, say that's old school thinking. Not necessarily old school thinking, it is the proper formula for how things are supposed to work. Sometimes there's just a formula that's accurate, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that the gender of the person playing a particular role has to be set in this, right? But the idea of you being a man and not being the person who provides the safety of your home is probably problematic, right?
I think that's missing overall too, though, because I had a situation. I'm always running into situations. So my wife was out somewhere. We had a date night out, and it was this young couple sitting in the parking lot, and the car had broken down. Didn't know the car was broken. I heard a guy kind of trying to turn the car over, but it would never crank up. So as opposed to him getting out of the car asking for some help, his girl got out of the car and asked me could I jump them off. And so I got out of the car and I handed him the jumper cables, and he was like, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And I look back at my wife and she was like, "Don't say anything." And I'm saying, because you don't even know how to even connect jumper cables to the battery, because he didn't know where the battery was on his own car that he was driving around in.
Right.
And so I had to jump him off. And as opposed to him getting out, he stayed in the car while his girl was outside watching me do everything, asking me questions.
Right. And so her opinion of him is going to change a little, right? I mean, she's going to figure that, wow, he couldn't even, So that's what I'm saying. You want to make sure you have the fundamentals down pat. We need to teach the fundamentals, right? And most men only want to make sure that you're a tough guy, right? And so we got a lot of tough guys in our community, right? But that doesn't really mean anything, because you find out that a lot of those supposedly tough guys,
they're not tough.
Yeah, they're not tough, right? They just know how to pretend, right? They've been taught to pretend. So a tough guy does the things that are difficult when no one's looking, right? The tough guy does the things and make the type of decisions that are necessary to grow a family, right? He's managing his money well. He's not living beyond his means. He's not flossing for flossing's sake. He's doing the things that a tough guy does, right? And then he's not looking for trouble, but if trouble comes, he flips the switch, right? And he becomes a predator, right? But he doesn't live like a predator, right? So, sometimes you just got to be able to understand the difference. You need to know what he's rooted in, right? And you just test him sometimes. Can you get behind that sink and change out that faucet? If you don't have no skills, then how were you ever even thinking about owning a home or you know what I mean? If you can't do none of that stuff, you don't know how to use a wrench. How do you have a car and you don't know how to change just the basic maintenance stuff? Change the oil, not change the oil, but put oil in it.
Or just change the tire out, change brakes out, change rotors out.
And I'm all for the idea. I'm all for the idea. I have money, I'll get that done. Right? Yeah. That's fine too. I don't have a problem with that. If a guy says, no, I don't know how to do that because I have money to get that taken care of, that's all cool too. That's not a problem for me. I can have somebody here in 15 minutes or whatever. That's fine, right? That's him taking care of things the way he sees fit to take care of things. The main thing is that it gets taken care of, right? And the person that's with him is confident that if something like that was to happen, he has that. He has emergency money and so forth and so on. So that's a way too for the guys that say, I'm not getting dirty, I'm not doing that because I'm not getting underneath that car. That's not my thing. Mm-hmm. Sure, if you have other means to make that happen, that's fine. She's going to feel comfortable too because yes, my man can provide. Right? That's
the only issue I have with that scenario though is some cars, not most cars nowadays, don't have spare tires in there. But let's say
that's right.
Let's say you out in the middle somewhere and you get a flat.
Yeah, you're right.
And you can't call a tow truck because the tow truck is like an hour, 2 hours away. You gonna sit out there with it 2 hours before you get out there and jack the car up and change the tire out?
Some people may, Some people may, because if you don't have the skills, you don't really have a choice. If you never put, it's like what we say about, self-defense. If you never thought about that scenario at the time it happens, you're in trouble. Because if you hesitate or you behind, you ain't got time. You don't have time for that. You have to think about these things ahead of time. Just like he said what his scenario would be with his wife, and what I said about if I was going to a restaurant. When I go to a restaurant, I carry a bag instead of on my hip or appendix because that's just too much to try to get to at the time. And then me and my son are sharing that particular duty. Those are things you have to think about, even at your home, right? You have to have scenarios for if someone tries to breach your home, right? What do? Where do your family go in your home to what's your safe place, right? How is that constructed? Do you have a security door on that? Is at least the bottom half of that door covered with something that can repel bullets, right? Where you can feel safe saying, okay, you guys go in there, I'll go clear the house. And, if I don't come back and you don't hear me knock on this door the way we supposed to knock on this door, if that door opened up, you fire. right? Because if they didn't identify themselves, you fire. Right? So you have to have those scenarios already. You can't do it when it happens.
Right.
So, that's a part of being prepared, right? That's a part of being a man, right? That's a part of being, like we said, somebody you can trust because he's worked out those scenarios. So, all right, you don't have to think about that, babe. I got that,
And to add to that, a lot, we talk about preparation, that builds confidence.
That's right.
So you think about, John said it, you think about your martial arts training that we've had, and you think about, you train for different scenarios, different situations, but you never show it. And that was one of the things I loved about taking martial arts, that you had this knowledge that you didn't necessarily have to show, but you had the confidence to use it whenever the situation arose. And when I started getting into gun ownership, the same thing. It was a fear of it at first, but then a confidence that's being built still over time of now certain situations. Okay, I know what to do and how to do it. So one, I'm more confident. One, I can be in a situation where I can safely protect if I want to use my hands, if I don't want to use my hands, if I have to draw. I'm confident enough to be in those situations now. And the more I train, the more I study, the more I practice, the more proficient that I will be. And I think as men, when we go back to the original question, is we're not prepared, and we've not been preparing ourselves for those situations. It's more about what you have versus what you can provide. And we see a lot of what people have, but then under the surface, can they really provide? We talk about the tough guy, the guy that's the loudest, the guy that, once you get him alone and you really put some hands on him, it's a whole different scenario. And it's interesting as I've learned this, not only through martial arts, but also through Bass Reeves, it's all really about being confident in what you can do and being confident in your training, and when you are confident, it shows and people see it. I had an old supervisor that told me a couple years ago, I can't teach confidence. I can teach you the rules of this game, I can teach you the rules of this, but I can't teach confidence. That's something that you have to exude. And I think once you understand your role and what you bring to the table, that shows. And I think that's what society needs to see in black men. I think that's what women need to see from us. Our children need to see that as well.
That's I think one of the best books I read when it came to martial arts was Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. The number one thing I ever took out of the book was he was like a true martial artist, true fighter, thinks about it all day, every day. You paint out every scenario in your head, and you always have a comeback as to how you would try to prevent the scenario. Of course, everything is unpredictable,
right,
but still you're mentally prepared for it. And both of you took martial arts, so it's the same thing. Like you doing shadow boxing or you doing your katas and all that kind of stuff. Like you keep going on getting muscle memory inside of you. So if anything happens, you're already mentally prepared to get up and do something.
Mostly what you're doing is trying to make sure you don't have the old crap moment.
Right.
Right? That creates that pause for that person to pummel you, right? You can teach confidence. So for those who are out there, are coaches or whatever, you teach confidence. I'll tell you how you teach confidence. You teach confidence by making sure that they're well prepared, right? And once they buy into how well prepared they are, confidence comes, right? So confidence comes from being well prepared, right? Give you an example. Tell you a little bit about myself. I finished 4th in the nation in high school in fencing. Right? I trained the youngsters beneath me, the physical conditioning. My coach did the lessons when he came, but he would come at 5 in the afternoon. And we would be given lessons for an hour. I was responsible for the building the athlete to be able to do the moves, right? So the conditioning. Having years of martial arts training, of course, was not a problem for me to do that, right? So we would do 100 push-ups in a day, right? Run them off in sets of 25. I got to the point where I get so tight in the chest I couldn't do those 25 like that. I started to press into a handstand and do my 25 that way, right? So now we got half of the team pressing into a handstand to do that 25 or doing diamonds or doing some other version because you get this part tight if you just continue to do the one style of it. What happens is we get to the point where we're challenging each other, but we're building to be such good athletes. When we get to competitions, the confidence is high and we're blowing through other teams because of our conditioning, right? They would run a 3-mile loop, I'd run a 5-mile loop and say, if I catch anybody, we're gonna have a problem, right? So you build them. They train extra hard for what actually they're going to experience, right? That team, I graduated, the team finally got fully funded. They became a dynasty, 10 state titles in a row, right? So you can build confidence is what I'm saying. Even when we have some shooters, new beginners come, right? You teach them the fundamentals. And you make sure you don't skimp. You make sure every detail of the fundamentals, right? Check their equipment, make sure it's from, and then they get bullseye, right? Before they leave, they get bullseye. Now that confidence is high because they know that if, number one, the gun is meant to shoot straight, right? So if you got a decent gun, it's gonna shoot straight. It's really what your fundamentals and you bring, and then your consistency with your fundamentals that allows you to shoot straight. Once they understand that, they have the intellectual information that they need, they have the buy-in, they're confident in their shooting, right? And we shoot 3-inch targets, 3-inch diameter targets, right? So, and we're shooting them at 10, 15, 20 yards, right? So that means that if I train you to shoot at 3-inch targets at 20 yards, right? 20, 25 yards, you're gonna miss a man-sized target?
No.
So your confidence is I'm never missing a man-sized target. So now you know when you go to draw that weapon, I'm placing my shots where I want to. I'm looking at immobilization zones, I'm looking at terminal zones, but I'm placing my shots because I have the confidence that I can do that. If you don't train, it's a diminishing skill. So, you know, we make sure you understand it. It's a diminishing skill. And so you must train on a regular basis and know your equipment, right? But confidence is definitely teachable. And anyone that has a lack of confidence is you is because you have not been consistent and you've not been showing a certain level of a proficiency in whatever it is that they're evaluating you in, you know? So preparation.
So knowing that you both are shooters and you have a background in shooting, what was your introduction to firearms?
Okay, so I'm from Jersey, right? So when I moved to the South, I watched the news, right? I got down to Atlanta and I'm watching the news, and I'm saying, these boys don't fight, they shoot, right? I think one of the lead song down here was maybe Killing, well, it was Mike, it was something like, I go out to the club, I can't remember the lyrics, but I pop the trunk.
Oh, yeah.
You know, right? Yeah, right? So that was like the song, and I'm like, okay, I'm from the New York metro area. I understand that every borough had a language, right, in terms of, you know, how you conduct yourself in that borough, different from Harlem, different in Brooklyn, so forth and so on. So now, like, I'm in the South, the language is different. Ain't nobody gonna tussle with me at the bar, you know? It ain't gonna be none of that. These dudes go to the trunk and pop. So, and I don't have none of that because I'm from Jersey, right? So the first thing I did was do my research, take a class. After I took a class, I bought myself a pistol, right, to have, understood the law, make sure I got a permit to carry, right? And then I took a bunch of lessons, you know, and I wasn't really satisfied, right? Because I feel like I'm still missing something, right? And I just keep taking lessons until I felt like, okay, now I have enough to put those lessons together and get a real complete lesson, right? But yeah, it was just understanding where I'm at and understanding that I have to have my own back because I'm down here by myself. And so I started going to the range and putting shots down range. It started to become a little bit of a therapy thing for me, like range therapy, right? And then the job I had made me travel the 9 states. So I'd find myself in places like Goat Rock, Alabama, and I realized that there's still sundown towns, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm never going anywhere without this. You can believe that, right? So that sort of instilled in me keeping my weapon with me, you know, on a regular basis because there's some places that just don't want to see you, you know. And there were times where I've had conflict simply because I drove a work truck and somebody thought I should not have that job, right? Driving that particular vehicle in their area. And that took a while because, I came down, I was 210 at the time, dreads down my back, and this was in the late 90s, so they weren't used to that, right? And I'm from the North, so I don't have no fear of others. You know what I mean? I'm from the North, we don't fear that. So the attitude to was something that brought sometimes some conflict. Like you expect me to move out your way, or you supposed to go before me, or you think you can cut the line in front of me. There's a little bit of re-education that had to happen. Wherever I was, right? And I felt like it was my duty to re-educate, because if I allowed it to happen, then they would continue to do that. So I'd frequently have to speak up, like, no, that ain't gonna work, friend. You're gonna get in the back. Who you talking? Yeah, you're gonna get in the back. And we look eye to eye, and I think he understood. You're gonna get in the back, or we gonna pound. Because you're not gonna mistreat me like I'm not a man. Mm-hmm. I understand the idea of the invisible man, but that's not me. So we're gonna work on that. We're gonna get you straight for the new millennium. Now, there's a lot of us down here. And so, we don't have those considerations anymore. Now it's okay to wear your hair natural wherever you are, because they understand that that's what you're gonna have to deal with, because this is what it is, right? But, and you can find yourself all over the world. You can find yourself in spaces like that. And, you have to be convicted that, I have a right to live and be exactly who I am, wherever I am. And I own whatever ground I'm standing on. And so there's a sort of energy, right, that we can perceive from one another, right? And it's one of those things sometimes is you let me live, I let you live, right? And then we can just agree to let each other live and walk on, right? Sometimes you can see a predator, he look at you, and then you have to let him know, okay, yes, I'm a predator too. What we doing? All right? Nothing has to be said, right? We don't have to say anything, but we understand each other. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we look at each other and we smile, right? That little grimly fiendish smile, like, yeah, I see you too, dog. We can share if you want to share. And I'm like, no, I'll go my way. You can have this, just let me be, right? So that's the way it is, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's interesting, the difference between the North and South. Because I've lived in the South my whole life, and so that's all I've seen. Mm-hmm. And my journey with gun ownership, actually, as a teenager, I was fearful of them because I had a lot of friends who got shot, injured. Fortunately, none of them were killed, but I've had several middle school or high school friends that one was paralyzed because the two were playing. Had a buddy that shot himself in the hand. And we're 15, 16 years old, and a lot of friends had easy access to this, and just seeing the results of playing with firearms at that age, I was like, I want to try my thing at martial arts. I felt more comfortable with that. However, fast forward to now, to where I am now. Last year, I injured my leg, and so I was walking around on crutches in a scooter, and I still had to be a parent and a spouse, and a lot of times I would find myself with my daughter by myself quite a bit. And of course, we've had several situations, at gas stations and things like that, people walking up on you, and I just felt vulnerable for about 7 months. Like, I'm sitting, I get out of my car, I'm literally on one leg, leaning on the car with my back to it, because that's the only way I can defend myself from a threat coming to me. Mm-hmm. And so it felt really bad. And during this time, my wife she bought me my first handgun, and of course, really couldn't use it because I couldn't come to the range or anything like that. On crutch, it was kind of hard. But once I, got back on, both feet, and I started to get real active in, going to the range, coming to a lot of the men's events, going out to South River, because I saw it. And once I actually started to learn the fundamentals, something just clicked. It was something different about it, and it was that, like I said earlier, it was that preparation and confidence. It was like I wasn't confident around handguns for a while, and my wife would bring, all of hers home and like, keep that over there. I'm gonna go down and do my thing. But then as I got to learn more about it, how they work, how they operate, the safety mechanism, I'm like, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought. And, of course, every night is repeated about this shooting, that shooting, and this and that. And then when you look at what happened or how they did it, it's like, okay, poor mechanics or just not knowing what they were doing, And I can see that now when I think back on my teenage years, I can see why a lot of those accidents happen. Because half of us in my community back then were not trained to use those, use guns, let alone be at our age playing with them. And even as adults, you said it earlier, if you don't practice, it's like, diminished skill. And so to me, it's almost like having a driver's license. Like once you learn to drive and you continue to drive, great. You improve your skills in some sort of fashion and whatnot. But then you have a period where you're not driving, where you can't drive, and you choose not to drive, you go back, not the same. And I think now as a registered gun owner and finding more enjoyment with it, it's a little stress therapy as well, it is something that I want to continue to build up on and make it a part of, just like going to the gym, make it part of my, weekly, monthly, daily, practice of using it and knowing how to use it.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Bass Reeves Gun Club podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to like and comment on the show to let us know what you think. And if you're interested in learning more about firearm safety, proficiency, and the shooting sports, and you're in the Atlanta area, please consider joining the Bass Reeves Gun Club. We're a pro-Second Amendment community of responsibly armed citizens, and we take pride in learning and sharing our knowledge within the community. You can find more about us and how to join at bassreevesgc.com. That's Bass Reeves, G as in Gary, C as in cat.com. Remember, stay fearless, knowing no master but duty. I am Antonio Hicks, and it's been my privilege to produce and edit this podcast, bringing these important conversations to life. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. If you're curious about more stories and insights in the avenue of politics, technology, and gaming, I invite you to join me on my own podcast, PTG TV. On PTG TV, we dive deep into a variety of topics, exploring the intricacies of our world with a mix of humor, seriousness, and everything in between. It's a space where we challenge norms, celebrate diversity, and foster a community of curious minds and open hearts. You can find PTG TV on all major podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Just search for PTG TV and hit subscribe. All opinions expressed by the podcast hosts, participants, and creators are their own and do not reflect the opinions of NAGA, the Bass Reeves Gun Club, which is the Atlanta chapter of NAGA or affiliated gun ranges, gun clubs, or companies.